On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, Day 284. New photos released showing female IDF hostages held in the Gaza Strip. Israel estimates they were taken shortly after the kidnappings on October 7th. The IDF concludes a week-long raid of an UNRWA facility within Gaza City, stating that Hamas had transformed it into a command center for terror activity. Intensive fighting continues in Rafah. The Al-Quds brigades report major fighting in the Yibna refugee camp, while the IDF reports intensive operations developing in the Tel Sultan region. Continued spirals between the IDF and Hezbollah, barrages of over 70 rockets and missiles fired by Hezbollah as the IDF carries out attacks and assassinations throughout southern Lebanon and in Syria. The EU imposes sanctions on radical Israeli settlers and movements, while both settler attacks and Palestinian attacks are reported throughout the West Bank. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the latest highlights from the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of July 16, 2024 in the United States, the morning of July 17, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, despite the initial statements that were made after the IDF's attempted assassination of Mohammed Def, in which the Egyptian negotiating team said that negotiations would be suspended, the negotiations have in fact not been suspended and are ongoing in the last several days. Hamas has denied any change in the hostage negotiation procedures, and on July 14th the movement actually put out an official statement saying the negotiations have not been suspended and that it is Israel who may be trying to foil the agreement, but Hamas, as far as it's concerned, is continuing the negotiations. On July 15th, Qatar also stated that negotiations are ongoing despite the assassination attempt. It is noteworthy, however, that alongside these statements, the summit meetings that were supposed to take place this week in Qatar among the top negotiators have not resumed. All sides right now appear to be in a de facto suspension. Everyone is saying they have not been suspended. Hamas is saying the negotiations are not suspended. Israel is saying negotiations are ongoing. Qatar is saying negotiations are ongoing. Nonetheless, factually, there was supposed to be a high-level meeting of all sides, which has not taken place. It may take place in the coming days. Right now, it seems that everything is simply de facto frozen. Trying to analyze this, I will say that it is possible that the source of the current holdup is that while negotiations have not been officially suspended, Mohammed Def played a critical role in the ongoing negotiations, and thus his possible death or injury or simply his condition being unknown may be causing delays in the process, even though it is theoretically still ongoing. Def is the most prominent Hamas military figure in the Gaza Strip and in general in the Hamas movement, and he's also known to be in constant contact both with the field operatives of Hamas as well as with the leadership. Accordingly, his role in determining what Hamas's military needs are on the one hand, and parlaying this to the leadership and saying what the military is willing to accept and what it would require of a ceasefire was crucial, and thus the assassination attempt is likely causing these delays in one way or another. In other words, if Mohammed Def is dead, then it is possible that Hamas is going to suspend the negotiations or they're going to be held up. In addition, if he's just injured or if his whereabouts are unknown, that may be also de facto causing these holdups. Either way, right now, the official status of the negotiations is that they are still ongoing. However, there have been no high-profile meetings that have taken place. According to some reports, they will take place later this week. Maybe. Everyone is still waiting for Qatar to initiate the invitation. That depends on if Hamas approves the next round of negotiations. Other news related to the hostage situation. On July 16th, new photos were published of the 5 female IDF soldiers that are still held hostage in the Gaza Strip. The photos appear to have been taken shortly after the 5 were kidnapped on October 7th and were reportedly located by the IDF during military operations that are taking place in the Gaza Strip. 4 of the hostages, Karine Arayev, Daniel Gilboa, Agam Berger, and Liri Elbag, are seen together in the pictures, while the 5th hostage, Naama Levy, appears to have been held separately from the group, and her pictures were also found. However, she was not seen with the group. According to reports, there was also a short video that was located by the IDF, however, that has not been published by the different sources that published these pictures. These pictures have been used in Israel as part of the protests that are calling upon the government to reach a hostage deal and secure the release of the 5 female soldiers who, at least according to reports, are currently still alive and are held in the Gaza Strip. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, there were continuous rockets and mortars that were fired from the Gaza Strip targeting the southern parts of Israel in the last several days. Rockets were fired towards the areas of Kerem Shalom on July 15th, and on July 15th, rockets were fired towards areas of Sderot, Ivim, Nir Am, and Givim. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad took responsibility for most of those barrages. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip on July 14th, the IDF completed a week-long raid of an extensive UNRWA complex in the area between the Savara area and Tel El-Hawa regions of Gaza City. The military reported that Hamas had turned the complex into a large military compound, and that within the complex there were also weapons storage areas for large drones, lookout posts, and a forward command center used by Hamas to direct military activity in the region, alongside food storages and with food stamps that Hamas had been using in order to distribute food to internally displaced population within the Gaza Strip. Again, all this happening within the UNRWA compound in Gaza City. The IDF reported that the compound is another sign that of Hamas's intensive attempts to recover and rebuild in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The IDF specifically cited both the fact that Hamas had managed to rebuild a lot of its military strength, as well as the fact that Hamas had been using the compound to distribute food, showing its governing capabilities and how it is trying to restore those capabilities in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip 6 months after the IDF pulled out of Gaza City. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, on July 14th, the IDF reported carrying out an airstrike in the Abu Ariban UNRWA school in El Nuseirat refugee camp, stating that Hamas had been using the area as a regional headquarters in the central parts of the Strip. The IDF stated that measures were taken in order to limit civilian casualties in this airstrike. Palestinian sources reported at least 15 people were killed and 70 were injured in that attack. In addition, on July 14th, the Al-Quds Brigades, that is a military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, reported carrying out mortar fire against an IDF headquarters along the Netzarim corridor, that is the corridor that the IDF is maintaining that divides the Gaza Strip from north to south. On July 15th, Palestinian sources reported a major airstrike in the El Maghazi refugee camp in the central parts of the Strip, killing at least 5 people, as well as other attacks that took place both in El Nuseirat and in El Bureij refugee camps. Light bombs were also reported in El Nuseirat refugee camps. This usually indicates that the IDF is carrying out a lot of ground activity in the area. According to reports, this is all part of the IDF intensifying its activity in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. On July 16th, there was a major airstrike that was reported in another school in the El Nuseirat refugee camp. Palestinian sources reported that at least 20 people were killed in that attack. After the initial Palestinian reports, the IDF also confirmed this attack, stating that it targeted an UNRWA school that was being used by terror operatives, after again taking measures to reduce civilian casualties. After this latest airstrike on July 16th, UNRWA put out a statement stating that some 70% of UNRWA schools throughout the Gaza Strip have been targeted by the IDF since the war began. According to the reports, 70% of the schools have either been badly damaged or have in fact been destroyed. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, there is continuous IDF activity that is reported in the Rafah region, including some IDF reports of uncovering some new tunnel entrances and detonating several attack tunnels. On July 15th, the Al-Quds Brigades reported intensive fighting in the Yibna refugee camp. This is in the area west of Rafah, specifically in the areas of Al-Abad Jaber, Al-Tuma, and the Burj al-Asi regions. On July 16th, very intensive fighting was again reported in Rafah, with the main battles this time focused in the Tel Sultan region. Tel Sultan is one of Hamas's more formidable battalions within the Rafah region. The IDF has reported intensive battles in Tel Sultan already for several weeks consecutively. In addition, on July 16th, the IDF reported carrying out an airstrike in Khan Yunis, targeting a platoon commander of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Palestinian sources later reported that at least 13 Palestinians were also killed in that attack. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. On July 15th, the UN put out a report estimating that some 40 million tons of rubble and waste have accumulated throughout the Gaza Strip as a result of over half the buildings being damaged or completely destroyed. The report also estimated that it will cost upwards of 500 to 600 million US dollars, and it will take over 15 years in order to completely clear the rubble within the Gaza Strip. In other news, on July 15th, responding to a court case in Israel, the IDF admitted for the first time since the war began that a substantial amount of IDF tanks have been damaged during the fighting, and that the IDF is also calculating its use of ammunition, specifically of the armored divisions, for fear of shortages of ammunition. The IDF response did not mention the U.S. or international shipments as the reason for shortages or fears of shortages with regards to ammunition. It simply stated that shortages do exist, and again, this was part of a court case in Israel that had actually nothing to do with the war. It had to do with different court cases that were filed against the IDF with regards to incorporating female soldiers in armored divisions. The IDF said that it cannot right now expand its different divisions, and in reporting why it cannot expand its divisions, it mentioned the damage to different tanks and the shortage of ammunition. Other news related to the Gaza Strip, there's been more speculation in the last several days with regards to the success or failure of the assassination of Mohammed Def, the leader of the Al-Qassam brigades. Hamas has maintained that Def survived the assassination attempt, although this comes from different press statements that were made by different Hamas leaders. The group itself did not put out an official statement saying that Def is alive or is dead. It was also reported on July 14th that Hamas has fortified the Deir al-Balah hospital, specifically securing the area where dozens of bodies from the attack are being brought, with speculation being raised that Hamas may be attempting to hide the discovery of Def's body among those different casualties. Meanwhile, both the IDF and Hamas have confirmed the death of Rafa Salameh, Hamas's Han Yunis division commander who was meeting with Def when the area was attacked. Speaking to the Saudi Al Arabiya news network, the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari implied that the IDF believes that Mohammed Def has been killed and that Hamas is hiding the information. He added that Salameh and Def were together in the compound when it was attacked and that Hamas has already admitted that Rafa Salameh is dead, and the IDF has confirmed this as well, and thus Hagari implied that Def is very likely also been assassinated in that attack. In other news, on July 16th, the IDF published an extensive report with regards to the progress that the IDF is making in the war. The report cited that the IDF estimates that out of an estimated 30,000 Hamas fighters at the beginning of the war, some 14,000 have been killed or arrested since the war began. While citing 14,000 as arrested or killed is in fact less than the previous statement that were made by Israel's security official, since in the past it was estimated that 14,000 have been killed. This report cites that 14,000 were arrested or killed. The report also notes that several thousand Palestinian Islamic Jihad and operatives of other militant groups were also killed, possibly compensating for the discrepancy. In other words, it is possible that the previous estimates of the security officials were saying 14,000 fighters were killed in the Gaza Strip. Now the IDF is estimating 14,000 Hamas fighters have either been killed or arrested. Again, that is speculation on my part. All I'm saying is that in addition to those 14,000, the IDF also notes several more thousand of other organizations. Possibly that compensates for that difference. Possibly it is simply different estimates. The vast majority of Hamas battalions are also noted in the report as being dismantled. However, 3 remain relatively intact. One in the southwestern parts of the Gaza Strip between Han Yunis and Rafah, and another one in the Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, and another one in the Deir al-Balah area. In addition, the IDF reports in that report that until now some 37,000 airstrikes have been carried out throughout the Gaza Strip since the war began, and adds all kinds of other notes regarding what specifically were the targets of these different sites. I'm not going to get into everything. However, this is one of the more extensive reports that the IDF has put out since the war began. Regarding casualties reported in the last 3 days, no IDF soldiers reported killed in the Gaza Strip since my previous report 3 days ago, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 326. 4 IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 3 days, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 2,128. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that 270 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 3 days. It's important to note that these numbers now include those reportedly 90 Palestinians that were killed during Mohammed Def's attempted assassination, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 38,443. In addition to that, 89,166 Palestinians were reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began, and there are still, according to different estimates, between 7,000 and 10,000 Palestinian bodies that are buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the West Bank, on July 14th, there was a car ramming attack that took place in Israel, not in the West Bank, near the Tzrifin area. This is between Lod and Be'er Yaakov near Ramleh. 4 Israelis were injured, 2 of them reportedly critically injured. I mentioned this within the area of the West Bank since the attacker was reportedly a Palestinian from East Jerusalem, and he was shot and killed. On July 15th, Palestinian warehouse was torched near the Burqa village, suspected by Israeli settlers. The words revenge were graffitied throughout the area in Hebrew. No arrests were reported. On July 16th, a Palestinian shooting attack targeting an Israeli car took place near the Ramin junction in the West Bank. 3 Israeli settlers were reportedly injured, and according to reports, there were at least 53 bullets that were fired in that attack. Palestinian sources later reported major IDF activity in the town of Ramin in pursuit of the attackers. The village is reportedly under lockdown since the event. In addition to that, on July 16th, a Palestinian woman was arrested in the Cave of the Patriarchs tomb in Hebron after reportedly trying to stab IDF soldiers in the area. In addition to that, on July 16th, during an IDF activity that took place in El Bira near Ramallah, a Palestinian from Gaza who lives in the area reportedly also tried to stab IDF soldiers. According to reports, he was shot and killed. In addition to that, there was substantial IDF activity that was reported all around the different villages near Nablus in the last several days, carrying out major arrest operations. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel and southern parts of Lebanon and Syria. As there are dozens of events that are taking place each day, I'm going to begin by giving a more generic list of the various rocket and missile attacks that Hezbollah fired towards Israel and the different IDF attacks carried out in Lebanon, followed by a focus on only some specific events that took place in the past several days. Throughout the past several days, rockets and missiles have been fired towards a vast array of areas throughout the northern parts of Israel and the Galilee. These include Kiryat Shmona, Tel Chai, Beit Hillel, Kfar Yuval. Rockets and missiles were also fired towards areas of Kfar Giladi, Mayan Baruch, Goshrim, Malachia, Mevot Hermon, Yiftach, Yara, Adamit, and the list goes on and on. In addition, there were IDF attacks that were reported nearly every day, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure, military structures, and lookout posts, and other Hezbollah targets in a vast array of areas in southern Lebanon as well. These include Misal Jabal, Bani Hian, Itash'a, Bitaron, Yarin. Attacks also reported in the areas of Ramia, Kila village, Bani Hian, Hula, Meruchin, and again, the list goes on and on. With regards to some specific events, there were major cycles of escalations that occurred between the two sides in the last several days. On July 15th, there was a major IDF bombing that was reported in the areas of Bin Jbeil, targeting a weapons warehouse. Lebanese sources later reported that 3 people were killed in this attack, with Hezbollah stating that one of those killed was Amer Dager, who is a prominent figure within the group. Hours later, a major barrage of over 50 rockets and missiles were fired by Hezbollah towards areas of Kiryat Shmona. Hezbollah stated that this barrage included both Falk and Katyusha missiles, adding that this was a response to the IDF attack in Bin Jbeil. On July 16th, the IDF carried out an airstrike in the El-Hardali region, targeting Hezbollah activists on a motorbike. 2 people were reportedly killed. Al-Akhbar later reported that the 2 were Syrian citizens. Lebanese media also reported that day of a major IDF attack that took place in the Tut region, reporting that 5 people were killed. According to the report, 3 of them were children and 2 of them were adults. Their identity was not given. Responding to this, there was a barrage of over 70 rockets and missiles that Hezbollah fired in close proximity to one another. These targeted the entire Galilee region, including the areas of Margaliot, Misgav-Am, Tel Chai, and again, the list goes on. Direct hits were noted in the areas of Kiryat Shmona, and there were at least 10 hits also noted in Mount Meron, where extensive fires broke out. Hezbollah stated specifically that that barrage, that included an array of different missiles, was launched in retaliation to the IDF attack in Tut. In addition, Hezbollah also claimed responsibility for firing Katyusha missiles at the Beit Hillel region, stating that this was in retaliation to the assassination of its operatives in the El-Hardali area. In addition, hours before recording this, there was a major barrage of rockets that was being reported throughout the entire Galilee, including the areas of Shlomi, Batzat, Liman, Nahariya, Sar, Ben Ami, and others. Al-Miyan also reported that there were brewing IDF attacks that were occurring in the Wadi Bargaz region. Again, this is part of this constant escalation between the sides. There is this constant, quote-unquote, low-level rocket fire and IDF retaliations going on every day. However, every day there's also this flare-up of a specific event the IDF carries out, and specific barrages of Hezbollah. This has been ongoing for several weeks. It remains to be seen if that is going to spiral down, or if it will escalate further. In addition, on the Syrian front, on July 15th, there was an attack that was carried out on the Beirut-Damascus road. Hours later, Syrian officials reported that one of those killed was Muhammad Bara al-Qatarji. He is reportedly a very prominent business figure within Syria and one of the close confidants of Syria's leader, Bashar al-Assad. According to reports, he is a key figure in the Syrian economy and also maintains very close ties with Hezbollah and other pro-Iranian militias. Al-Qatarji also appears on the U.S. sanction list, and the Saudi Al-Hadath later reported that he has very close ties to Iran as well, and among others he is known for smuggling both oil and drugs. Again, the IDF did not claim responsibility for that assassination, however, this did occur almost exactly in the same place as the IDF carried out a similar airstrike last week on the Beirut-Damascus road. This appears to be a pattern that the IDF is carrying out, this time targeting a prominent figure in the Syrian economy. Some regional news from the last several days. On July 14th, the Houthis claimed responsibility for attacking an Israeli ship, the MSC Uniphis, in the Gulf of Aden. The statement the Houthis put out stated that this attack was a response to the IDF assassination attempt of Mohammed Def. On July 15th, U.S. Central Command reported that the Houthis attacked another Israeli-owned ship that was ferrying cargo from China to Russia. No damage was reported, and the U.S. Central Command also reported that 5 Houthi drones were intercepted. In addition to that, on July 16th, the Syrian news agency reported that a vehicle transporting pro-Iranian militia members was attacked in the Al Bukhma region. The report said that the attack was done by unknown attackers. I only mention that because usually the Syrian news agency would state and automatically almost blame Israel for such an attack. The fact that they specifically said that was done by unknown attackers may mean that there is some suspicion that it is in fact different actors other than Israel. Remains to be seen. Some political news from the last several days. On July 15th, the EU imposed new sanctions on radical settlers in Israel. These include known settlers such as Moshe Sharvit and Tzvi Bar Yosef. Sanctions were also imposed against the Tzav 9 movement, Baruch Marzel, and against Ben-Zvi Gopstein, the founder of the Lahava movement. So just a couple words about these. Tzav 9 is a movement I've mentioned several times in my report. It is a movement in Israel whose aim is to disrupt the entrance of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, while Lahava, I also mentioned last week as there was another sanction list, is a movement that is dedicated to Jewish racial supremacy within Israel, and it is known for attacking Arabs and Palestinian men who have relationships with Jewish women. The other people on the sanction list that the EU put out are known activists that are involved in acts of violence against Palestinians. There's also a report in Israel that there's growing concern that the wave of sanctions against settlers is going to gradually be expanded not only to other countries, but possibly to include the settlers that have business activities within Israel that is then also going to affect the Israeli economy. Again, this is at this point just a fear, but it is a growing fear within Israel. And one final political report, the UK's foreign minister is currently visiting Israel. On July 14th, he met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu as well as with the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa. He since had a lot of other meetings with a lot of other different officials, both the security and foreign office within Israel. On July 14th, he put out a statement in which he called for an immediate ceasefire in the war. He also called for a release of all hostages, protecting all civilians, unlimited aid to flow into the Gaza Strip, and developing pathways towards a two-state solution. Again, the biggest news that is being reported in the last several days is first that the hostage negotiations is, at least according to reports, still ongoing. However, it appears to be artificially suspended at this point as all sides are waiting to see maybe what is the condition of Mohammed Def or how negotiations are going to proceed without him if he is badly injured or killed. In addition to that, there is growing reports of more fighting going on in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip as well as in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. All this remains to be seen how it's going to develop and how it is going to possibly influence the hostage negotiations if they do develop. Remains to be seen. More on that obviously in the coming days. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. Please do also help me in sending them out to anyone you think might be interested in news about the war. Any listservs you're on, please just send them the link. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Those are my highlights from the last several days. Thanks for watching.